host, Sean Lynn, in the pub for a Dram with friends, where we talk about faith, family, food, and fun. Pull up a chair and I'll pour you a drink. Episode 96. We are extremely blessed to welcome Father Kenneth LeBlanc, who will talk about growing up in the family of a lumberjack and hearing the call to the priesthood. Sit back as we enjoy a dram. Good. So basically it's just we talk about faith, family, food, and fun, and you've already poured yourself this Lagavulin 16, which is...
Yeah, this is really good stuff.
It is. I quite like it. Not everybody likes this, but
no,
it's got that peat and smoke.
Yeah,
and
I find the more peat smoke, the better I like it.
There you go, because you're an outdoors guy.
Yeah, it reminds me of like a big fire, right? Like on a campsite,
Yeah. So for those, we are very blessed to have Father Kenneth LeBlanc. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, you have. Perfectly.
Join us in the pub today. So for our friends in the pub, who is Father Kenneth LeBlanc?
So, I'm originally from New Brunswick, French Acadian, from a town called Rogersville.
Okay.
In New Brunswick. And what's special about Rogersville, and what used to be special, because what I just learned today, that the monastery, they had a Trappist monastery there, and we live almost next door to it.
Oh, wow.
And that had a special influence on my family, getting to know the monks, and they were holy men. But what I just learned recently, just today actually, that they actually closed the monastery now.
Oh, no.
Because they're lacking vocations. So they had been there for 122 years, and now they're closing. They only had 3 monks left. But I really appreciative of that place, because I used to go there as a kid to work with them, with the monks, and pray with them and spend weekends there. And it was really an oasis of spirituality.
That would be.
And I met some amazing people there, and that's how really I developed my faith at that place.
Okay.
And well, I mean, basically my family was the base of my faith. They really helped me a lot, but that helped a lot, that place there.
And they do like the Vespers daily, don't they? And
they did. I would love to attend the offices. Sometimes at 3:00 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
But the office I loved the most was always just normal night prayers. So I would take my 10-speed back in the 80s,
Yeah.
I would take my 10-speed and just, so it was about 3 kilometers away. So I would ride all the way there and then go do night prayers with them. And we would end with the Salve Regina. It was so beautiful, right? They would close all the lights, and there was like a spotlight on Our Lady, and they would sing the beautiful Salve Regina. And then I would ride back home in the dark. At that point it was dark. And then it was just a beautiful way to end the day.
So we've got a lot of men here in the office or in the pub that don't understand what the office is, or the office of readings that you're talking about. Can you just give a brief overview of what that is?
Yeah, so the offices or divine praises, or no, not divine praises, but the divine office, they call it. So basically for thousands of years, right, the monks would get together and sing all of Psalms, like over a period of time. And so what they do is they separate all those Psalms and readings throughout the day. So they developed, you get up really early in the morning, around 3:30. They call that the vigil.
Okay.
And then you go back to bed for a while, or then you come back around 6 or 7 and then do morning prayers. And then you would do the divine readings, the office of readings, they call it. And so, and then after that, you come back and do terce. Terce usually is about from 11 to 12. And then there's also sets. And that goes from noon to 1. And then there's also, what was the last one there? It just escapes me. But then it's from 1 to 2, usually 1 to 3.
Oh, wow.
And then after that is Vespers around 5. And then after that is night prayers around 8:30.
So a lot of that's incorporated into our diocesan priest daily routine, right?
So what happened is, so the monks for thousands of years were that's what they lived every day. They would do these prayers together as a community, sing it right in Latin or whatever, and then in between those offices they would be working. So that's what the Benedictine's theme in life is: pray and work, ora et labora, pray and work. So it's the idea of sanctifying time, right? Every time is a moment where you pray to God, the time of the day, and then during that time you have Mass too, concelebrated Mass during that time.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of time in the chapel.
Yes.
So what happened is when you had monks that started, like for example, like Franciscans or became missionaries, and what happened is that they didn't have time to always get together and pray those things all day long.
Yep.
They had work to do. They had to travel. They had to do preaching. They had retreats to do, all kinds of things. So what they did was they called it a breviary. Breviary means to be briefer.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And so they just it's a briefer format of all those psalms and things that they were singing. And you don't have to be singing it; you can just be saying it. And so a person I travel a lot, so
yes,
like I stop on the side of the road and do my midday prayers, and do that, and then I keep on going. And it's done quicker because you're not singing the whole thing, and you're not coming together as a community to do it. So you're more just doing it on your own. So that's what we call the breviary. So it's a book that you bring, it has all those psalms and all those prayers and all the offices and readings together in one book.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you just alluded that you spend a lot of time on the road. Like, what are you doing on the road all the time? Like, why are you on the road?
Well, see, I'm part of an order of priests called the Legionaries of Christ, and our spirituality is to really form the laity to be apostles, right? To go out and do evangelization. So my whole life is to really help in their formation and give them retreats and things like that. And so that movement, so we have a movement that does that.
Okay.
So that's the whole movement is about. It's forming the laity to fall in love with Christ and to want to make that love known everywhere. So that's the whole spirituality of that. So that movement is present in many different cities of Canada, and so especially out west, that's my role to kind of follow up with them and be a priest in their life. I come by a couple of times a year, so it's not all the time. My base is here in Calgary. So, like, if you're a member of the movement, well, you're asked to do at least one weekend of spiritual exercises every year, like a retreat.
Okay.
Where you leave your home a bit and you go to a retreat center and you just kind of dedicate and talk to God and to be present. So I help lead those things.
Okay.
So I do like maybe 15 to 20 every year of those sets of retreats.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes it's in Vancouver, sometimes Edmonton, sometimes in different cities.
When we were talking that you get out to Quebec as well, and
yeah,
so you're doing it right across the country.
As a young priest, I started off in Quebec, so I still, all those people that I would work with back then are still working, still doing retreats. There was this man, a lay person, that every year he gets 60 men together to have a retreat at the monastery of Saint Benoit du Lac, there near Sherbrooke, Quebec.
And that is why I thought I needed to talk to you. Because, as you know, we're trying to grow ministry to men across North America, and just bringing those leaders together and forming them. And And that's why I thought it was a perfect opportunity for us to share a dram and just talk about men and how to reach them, because you're out there doing that.
Yeah.
And we want to be a support network for them. So that's why we're here having a dram and letting the people know who you are and the work that you're doing. So
Yes. So when I was a teenager, I mean, I started thinking seriously about the priesthood, and so it really, especially after a special retreat that I had at the monastery, and it just really came very strongly, and I and I decided to become a priest. Although I didn't feel called to be a Trappist monk, I didn't feel that was my calling, and also I didn't feel that it was my calling to be a diocesan priest, but to be more like a missionary, like among a brotherhood. So yeah, and I found this order, and I really have loved it ever since.
and didn't so my understanding, you started out as a lumberjack.
Yeah, yeah. I come from a family of lumberjacks.
Oh wow.
Yeah, in the '80s, that was still a thing.
Okay.
Lumberjacking anymore, it's more about machines.
Yeah.
So but back then it was still the men who were cutting the trees and cutting it all and putting in,
Like
in
that's manly
piles
work.
of wood and all this stuff. So my dad, that he was working with that, and my uncles, and so we also, the only way to do a fire at our place or to have heat, it was to to have firewood. That was the
Oh
only way
wow.
to heat the house. So it was our job as kids to chop all the wood and then bring it in and always keep the fire burning. That was our
So
job.
and that's where I talk about this often, that a lot of people view history in the lens of today.
Yeah,
And you're not talking that long ago, like in the
I know.
60s and 70s, right? When you were a kid.
Yeah, I was born in '72, and
Okay.
so I grew up more in the '80s. I was a teenager in the '80s and early '90s.
Yeah.
So yeah, but quickly in the '90s, that's when sort of like the lumberjacking and all that kind of disappeared because it was more replaced by machines. So yeah,
Yeah. And so we didn't just flick a switch in your house and the heat came on, right? Where a lot of, like, my grandparents were settlers in southern Alberta,
yeah,
and I heard stories of them having to go out and collect cow patties to heat the house because they didn't have trees where they were,
mm,
right in
yeah,
the prairie, and and these hardships that people went through. A lot of our young people today have no concept of that. So we, and that's where trying to reach them where they're at and helping them understand where some people have come from, because we in today's culture we tend to label everybody and
yeah.
without understanding where they're coming from. And
Mm.
how do we help people understand other people's journeys, or guide, especially as you say you're a missionary? How do you get the assistance from the laity to join you in that mission, to that accompaniment with people?
Well, I would say I look for people that are hungry to be better, um, to be holier. You can find them. Like I remember there was a couple of years where I was living in Oakville and Ontario, and there was this parish, and I was sort of a part-time associate pastor
Okay.
because I was very good friends with the pastor there, and he needed help because he was sort of like had a hard time walking and different things. And I needed also the exposure because I had just arrived there and nobody knew me. So,
Okay.
so it was like a win-win.
Yeah.
Win for him, he gets the help. Win for me because I get exposure
Yeah.
to the people that they get to know us. And so I remember that I didn't know anybody, so I just started. I started different things. Like I started maybe a Bible study, right? Like a Bible timeline
Yes.
of Jeff Cavins, and
Yeah.
I started a history of the church night where we would discuss the history, how the church became what it is, and also another night was Stump the Priest night, And
like
so we
that.
would talk different controversial things. So I would actually look for controversial things so to get people there.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
yeah, it was quite interesting. And then I had another night of different things. It was every night was different, and so I remember almost every night I would go to a different group and try to. And people little by little were growing in their faith. So because they would discuss, and I would always tell people, look, you can be in disagreement with me, just tell me why, and then we'll dialogue, we'll be friends, and we don't have to agree, right?
Yeah.
But so it was a really good atmosphere, and you could see people after a year of doing that, their faith changed. Like some of them, like before, they may be confused in many things, but all of a sudden became more convinced about Christ or about the church or about different things. There was one lady I remember; she was very new agey.
Yeah. Yeah.
And after 3 years of that, like she became like a real fervent Catholic. And it's because the faith in itself is very enlightening. It really feeds your hunger, and makes people want more, you know. And I remember there was one guy and his wife. They came the first year, and they were more like pew warmers,
Yeah.
like they would just go to mass every Sunday, but they didn't want to do anything else. So they kind of came to this Bible thing, and then I all brought them to the Holy Land as well on a pilgrimage. And,
Oh, wow.
and I told them, because they were very smart people, they had high jobs, high positions in Toronto. And I said, next year, you're going to be giving this course. And it happened. They actually gave the course the next year, and they brought it to many more people than I ever had. They had like 80 people on this course, 60, 65. And they did it for like 10 years in a row. And if I'm not sure, they might be still doing it. And they became like real like pillars in the church, like real active, and started many different things. And it's because this thing provoked in them a hunger, right, to want more. I want more formation there. And they realized the faith was a lot more than what they thought it was.
And that's like Archbishop Fulton Sheen, right? There's not 1,000 people that hate the Catholic Church for what she is, but there's millions who hate the Catholic Church for what they think she is. Right?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
And
Yeah.
we talked about this, where engaging the men and bringing them in. I talked about it at that breakfast last week, where making room and inviting them in to the journey, because unfortunately our church, we bring them in through RCA and say, here, you're in, see you, call me if you need anything, kind of thing. Or we never move them along that continuum to be that missionary disciple and invite them into that. We allow them to kind of stay as pew warmers quite often. So I love that analogy, that story, because it's encouraging as we're going through a diocesan renewal, parish renewal here in Calgary, just inviting and encouraging others to join that mission.
Yeah. A lot of it is accompaniment and being friends with them. And I've also noticed that too. Sometimes we get them in RCIA, and then after that, there's no more follow-up,
Yeah.
But that's for me, that's a very special moment. Once someone, they're like all eyes, like a baby. They're all eyes wondering, hey, yeah, this is going to be great. I can discover amazing things. But then all of a sudden we just kind of let them go, So we need to continue accompanying them and maybe give them a role, maybe give them an apostolate, give them a ministry.
Yes.
And wow, they can do incredible things. But it's about formation, about accompaniment, and intentionally forming disciples, right? That's the idea, like what you're trying to do.
Well, and one of the young men that just was received at Easter, he's been coming to our men's breakfast, and we're having great conversations. And he was talking about having this place where he could share this excitement, because they can't necessarily do that, especially if they're coming into the church alone and their family's not really understanding or supporting them, and their friends are going, what are you doing, kind of thing, or they don't tell anybody because they're on this journey, and the world quite often well, growing up, my dad was telling me, "Nope, you don't talk about religion or politics, right? Like
Right.
at work." And
Yeah.
you just, which is interesting, where there seems to be more of an openness now to start sharing, and there is that hunger that we're seeing, people searching because the world has left them wanting.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you see it a lot, like in the mountains or nature. People love nature, right?
Yeah.
And but sometimes they always don't always make the connection with nature and the beauty that is there with the creator, right? So that's another venue when one could, evangelize in a way, especially today's world. I think today there's a very special sensitivity to nature and creation. Sometimes it goes overboard, but
Yeah,
but I think that's an opportunity of evangelization there.
and where we live is
Yeah.
probably one of the like you go to Banff or Lake Louise, and it's hard to understand how there's an atheist because of the beauty and the nature, and
Yeah.
how could this have just happened by accident is hard to fathom
Right.
because it's incredible.
So I think that's a great venue because God created two books, right? Like the book of Revelation,
Yeah.
right? The not the book itself, but all of Revelation. God is the author of all that.
Yes.
But He also created the book of creation, like the creation. So He's the author of both. And so sometimes we can use this book because that's what people accept.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, by discussing that, they might also open up to the other, more the supernatural revelation, right? That God gave us.
So when you're on the road or you live in community, which I think is incredible, because my perception is there's a lot of priests that are isolated,
Hmm.
given their job and their role in churches today. So is there do you do any of the cooking, or are you is there a
Um,
dish that you like to?
Sometimes, but it's very rare. The fathers know I'm not a very good cook, so
Oh, okay. So they
some of the fathers are better. But I'm pretty good at cooking breakfast. That's
okay.
so I dedicate myself to that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a dish that's your go-to that?
Oh, when it comes to sorry about that. When it comes to breakfast, I like to change it up. I do pancakes, French toast, but I'm more of an egg and bacon guy. So
I,
I do a lot of that,
I'm
and omelets, and yeah.
I'll have to share my breakfast sandwich with you because it's a winner.
Yeah, so community life super important. We underline that a lot, but see, priests are very busy, so it has to be intentional. Like what we do is we are six priests living together. So on Sundays, Sunday nights, or even Monday nights, sometimes we get together and we go over the calendar together
Okay.
of the week, or for 2 weeks usually, and we say, well, this week we need to be together at least 3 times. So let's organize, okay, let's meet for supper on this night, or let's do night prayers together here. Let's do a Eucharistic hour here together. So we intentionally organize and plan these encounters.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sometimes there's only a couple of us. I mean, most of the time there's always someone there.
Yeah.
But where we want everybody to be there, we said those 3 meetings this week has to be, there's no excuse. We have to be there. So we have to be intentional about organizing that.
So you're hitting on something that heroic men, God Squad, whatever hat I'm wearing, I think I got both here. Is creating that atmosphere of brotherhood, so that men know that they're not alone, because that's one of the things that we're seeing in the research that we're looking at is men are lonely, and creating those connections is so important to help them on the journey. So that authentic friendship. So we're using a model, the Making Missionary Disciples by Curtis Martin. So first we have to be Christocentric, understanding our relationship with Christ, but then that authentic friendship we have, and that's what you're talking about, building that brotherhood. But it sounds like yours is very intentional, pointing to the Christocentric part of it, because you're talking about holy hours and stuff like that,
Yeah.
praying together. So
And sometimes it's just to be together. Like last Monday, we organized a hike. That was my job.
okay,
So we went on a hike to Stanley Glacier and Marble Canyon.
oh wow,
And so we spent a day together, and that was great. And then in the evening we had our calendar, discussion, and so we have all our next meetings organized for the next 2 weeks.
oh, did you get the disc golf game in next?
Well, we had a priest that was really good at disc golf
I know.
a couple
Father
of years
Mike,
ago, Father
yeah.
Mike, right?
Yeah.
But he's gone off to another city, so now we're not so much into that.
Oh, okay.
So I'm more into hiking and stuff like that, But different fathers like different things.
Yep.
So we allow that too to happen, because my priest needs his rest and little hobbies,
Yep.
So one, like I like walking and I like hiking. Another father likes, to get away and do some golf a little bit, and then some, I don't know, what do you call it? This new popular game that they have, pickleball.
Okay.
He loves pickleball.
Okay.
So he finds people that likes that, and
well, Richard on our board will be very happy to hear that. So he's played a lot of pickleball. I haven't tried it yet, so
yeah,
it might be on the to-do list in the future. So what you're saying is priests are normal men that need to have rest and recreation?
yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
It sounds very obvious, but it's very easy as priests to just be in the office and just work, and then, and don't have that fraternal thing. If you have to be intentional about it, and because that's the big. I think that's the big temptation as priests, is that sometimes we're tempted by apostolate or by ministry, and then we avoid prayer or community life, and those other two are even more important, I would say. So.
Wow. Okay. So just out of interest, now that one of the segments that we've done is, what advice do you have for your 18-year-old self? So it sounds like you were spending time at the monastery early on, but
yeah, I joined when I joined the seminary, I was 18.
Okay.
So 3 days after high school, I took off for the seminary, and I've been there ever since.
Wow.
Well, yeah, what would I say? Yeah, basically I would say just continue doing what you're doing. I actually love that time of my life very much. It's I spent from 18 to 20 in a novitiate, and we call it the university where we study Christ.
Okay.
And I would say those are the best 2 years of my whole life ever.
Wow.
Because we didn't do any apostolate that much. We didn't go out. We just stayed in the novitiate, and that's all we did was studying Christ. And so I can say I was pretty much living as a monk the whole time. And where I learned a lot about the faith, about Christ, about how to be religious, how to pray, how to sacrifice, all these different things, brotherhood, community. It was a beautiful time for me. Yeah.
Wow.
So when I look back on those days, actually, sometimes when I want to make a decision how I live my life now, I usually refer to that time, because I learned so much about religious life during that time.
So young men, don't be afraid to take a pause and get to know Christ.
Yeah. A lot of people say, well, you should have gone to university or whatever. But I mean, we have a long formation. It's like 12 to 14 years.
Oh, really?
So I was pretty sure this was for me, and I had no doubts. So well, they're going to give me a university in time. So I just went in right away, and I felt that's what God wanted.
Okay.
So you see, when I thank God every day, because when I was 16, that's when I really started searching for God. I felt the world did not really have much to offer me, in a sense. I felt it was empty. And so that's when I went on that retreat to the monastery, and I felt when I went there, I was looking for God. I was really looking to have a friendship with God again, because when I was early teens, I kind of forgot I was more of a cultural Catholic and going to mass every Sunday, but Christ was not really my friend. You know, there's a difference between being Catholic and also having Christ as your friend. You know, there's a huge difference, right? A lot of times you see Catholicism more as a theory or as a culture and checking the boxes, right?
Yeah.
But that moment is when I realized Christ was a real person that is in my life, that talks to me and I can talk to him. And he became really a huge facet in my life at that retreat. And that's when I really started thinking seriously about the priesthood, because I always felt it in me.
Okay.
And then after that, I met this hermit, you know, that really became sort of my mentor. And this old hermit, and he had long white hair, long white beard, you know,
Kind of a Gandalf.
yeah, a Gandalf figure. And in fact, he would play very well that role.
Okay.
He was sort of a rabbinical scholar. He would write books to the rabbis. Anyway, it was an interesting figure. And he's the one that told me about this congregation. And he organized my plane ticket and to go see in the United States this order. And anyway, I really thank God I found that treasure very young.
Wow.
So
yeah, and that's where listening, and God can call us at any time, right?
Exactly.
But being open is the big thing that I stress with young men, and I'm sure Father Cristino is going to love some of these segments that you sharing, because all what you're inviting the young men to do is just be open. You're not saying, well, Father Larry says he goes around punching the young girls, saying, are you going to be a priest? And just that consideration, being open to it.
Yeah, and in fact, that's what I've been doing most of my life is as a priest, really is searching other young men that are possibly thinking about the vocation and trying to help them. Sometimes I challenge them. Sometimes I just gently, accompany them. So that has been great. And I always tell them one thing, you got to try things, you got to go forward somewhere. Because Christ said to those two young men that came to him, Master, where do you live? He said, come and see, right? So come and see, meaning do something, so they did go with him and they saw, and that's when they were convinced. A lot of times we were thinking about the vocation, but we just stay home and wait for, I don't know, a text or something, but it never really happens. Christ is waiting for you to make a step. Mm-hmm. So, go visit an order that you like, that you are attracted to, or go visit a weekend at the diocese, or, do something, because then God will give you more signs after that. Sometimes it's clearly a no, so that can happen.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a green light. Okay, well, maybe I'm ready for the next step, the next level, right? So maybe I'll come for a program in the summer or something like that. And then God will tell you more. It's always an adventure.
But God is called, our diocesan renewal that I talked about. It's you are called. You're not necessarily called to the priesthood, but you are called by Christ to do a mission of some sort.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously not a priest, but I went through this last year where, okay, why do you continue to call me? Why have I been doing ministry to men for so long? Why do I still have this on my heart? Why did I retire as a policeman to do this full time? Why have you continued to ask me to do this? Trying to understand. And so God has a mission for each and every one of us.
Yeah. That's what's exciting.
Yeah.
And it's a mission tailored for you. And, it's, that's what you see. Everybody has different gifts and different things that they can be good at. And following Christ, well, you discover them. I was very surprised in many ways, the things that I discovered in a seminary, things that I would have never even tried if it wouldn't have been for my directors, my superiors trailing me, encouraging me to go in that direction, because they saw things that I didn't see, right? And you see also God's action supporting what you do. A lot of times it's very human what you do, and we're all like have our defects and all our problems, but God supports what you're doing. He's His Holy Spirit, and He's really supporting that, and you see that happening, you know, and it's always so beautiful as a priest to see God's grace action in people, in the soul of people. And in confessional, you see the peace, the relief, the serenity that happens, in there, and that's so beautiful,
And if people just understood what happened in there, like, lost that anxiety because of that peace that they are receiving is incredible, right?
Exactly, yeah. I remember I can tell you one story, how about that the Holy Spirit really supports what you're doing. And I was in Oakville, and I was on the list of priests call. I was like one of the last persons on the list as if at the hospital. So they have a list of people when there was an emergency they call. I was the last on the list.
Okay.
And so a couple of times that day, for some reason, no priest was available, and I was the one they were calling. And so I went 3 times to the hospital in a row. Like I would go there, do the thing, and then come out. And on my way home, I would get another call and then go back. And then I went back home and then another call and then come back. The last call, the nurse was telling me, there is this lady here that she's in denial that because her husband had just passed away, unfortunately. They had been trying to tell her that her husband had cancer and he was going to pass away, and she was just in denial, and so now he had just passed away and she was distraught, right? And like a trauma. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling when that nurse told me this, she said, "Can you come?" And I said, wow, like this is really above my pay grade. What can I do with this? Like my theology class did not teach me what to do with this, right? And so I right away I felt, okay, I'm just going to pray the Blessed Virgin to help me out here. I'm just going to go in faith. And so while I was going there with the car, I was praying to the Blessed Virgin to help me out. And I remember arriving in the room where she was with her daughter. And when they saw me, because they saw the collar and the black and all that, they right away became like sort of, they were like a lot of deference towards me about this. And then right away, I just kind of hugged them and I said, let's pray together. And we started praying to the Blessed Virgin and all these different things. You could feel in the room like the whole tension just go away. There was like a peace. You can feel it. You can actually touch it almost. And the person just totally became happy. This lady. And she started talking and it was almost like a consolation happened there. It was really supernatural what happened. Like totally above what I did. I was just there doing what a priest does. And then I remember coming out of the room after 15 minutes. The nurse looking at us, she just looked at me. She felt like, you're some miracle worker? Like, because they had seen her before and after. And I told her, it's not me. It's the Holy Spirit. It's the Blessed Virgin. It's Christ, the God, Christ's grace. They invited me to do the funeral afterwards. So I did the funeral for them. And there was just, there was like a healing there and an acceptance, a surrender to the plan of God in spite of a very difficult moment.
So let me get this straight. You felt inadequate to do what, but you said yes and went forward in faith, and God did his work.
Exactly. And that's what happens every day as a priest. Almost every day. Or as a layman.
Because I just got a letter from a buddy of mine that is somebody written about his son who was in a similar situation up north where he had called for the air ambulance and then realized, no, he's not going to make it. And was compassion and loving towards the family. And the paramedics and stuff that came in just could not believe the witness, and it's being Christ to these people in those moments that
That's what's beautiful about being seeing yourself only as an instrument, and that's what's beautiful by being a disciple of our Lord is you're the disciple, he's the Lord.
yes.
So you just do what you're told.
Yep.
Follow the Holy Spirit, do what you have to do. The Lord will be assisting you. He will be present. And you can do amazing things, because the Lord is present. It's about him. And so yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff. And that's not just for priests, for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like you were saying.
Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to visit the pub. I don't know if you know, but the Gaelic term for whiskey is Ishkabaha, which means water of life.
Really? Yeah?
And I pray that you lead many souls to the true water of life.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of A Dram with Friends. Like and subscribe. Go to all podcast platforms to look for it on podcast, or go to godsquad.ca to support our mission.